Hello and welcome to Indo Politics from the Irish Independent. Well, from the speaking row to the race to the Áras, from real two-finger greetings to fake social media posts, and from prudent Pascal to sensible Simon, 2025 has been quite the year of contrasts in the world of politics. I'm Fionnán Sheahan, and this week, instead of bringing you the usual political rap, that was rap, not crap, of the week, I'm joined by the three wise men and women of the Irish Independent political team, Mary Regan, Cónal Thomas and Tabitha Monahan, to go through the winners and losers of the year and give out some awards. Each of them has chosen one person for each category, which are Politician of the Year, Controversy of the Year, Gaffe of the Year and Brat of the Year, which of course is in the Charlie XCX meaning of the word. I'll hear the arguments each of the team have for selecting their chosen person. At the end of each round, I'll choose a winner. And the person with the most victories at the end, well, they're the winner. And that's actually how elections work, contrary to the people who spoil their votes. Okay, we'll kick it over to the panel now. And we're going to start with Gaffe of the Year. And this is not supposed to be the most serious thing that happened throughout the year. But Tabitha, I'm going to start with you. Give me your Gaffe of the year.
Yeah, so I have gone for Joanna Donnelly's bid for the Áras, short-lived bid for the Áras. She announced in September, I think it was about 52 days before the election, which, I mean, in fairness, there were many people who were coming out quite late in the day for this. But I think it was the naivety that she demonstrated and how I think many people who considered themselves worthy of running for this election were considering this, you know, that she said, you know, I'm trustworthy, I'm a normal kind of down-to-earth person, I'm the type of person that can be the president, that it should be apolitical. But she went on radio, she went on TV that day when she announced that she had that she was going to run, and she was questioned on certain things like, what's your opinion of the EU? And she said, well, you know, I believe that everything should be questioned, question everything about everything. And she hadn't spoken to anybody. She hadn't sought any advice about the campaign or what that'd be like. And she admitted that she didn't know if she had the political skills to be able to get through the campaign, but she, you know, to be able to convey that she was worthy, and that she had only contacted the councils because she was going the council route at midnight, just before midnight, when the process closed. So it was a really last minute decision, and you thought this is a really serious election because, as we saw, and we also know that it's quite a serious job and something that people should take seriously. And it felt quite last minute for her. And then within, was it 2 days, 3 days, she had withdrawn because she said that she was naive and she did seek advice and she didn't know if she really had it in her for the campaign.
Maybe she was the lucky one at the end of the day. Mary, what are you going with?
I'm going to go with the Jim Gavin down in the farm not closing the gate, because
Lord Jim of the Manor,
our first introduction really to Jim Gavin. He had won the Fianna Fáil vote and we didn't really see much of him in the media after that. But this is where the public got to know him, was the week of the ploughing. He did a video to show his farming credentials, and I think it shows that while, you know, the saying goes that most political careers end in failure, this is a political career beginning in failure. And the only talking point at what was the first week of the presidential campaign was this man trying to show his credentials with Rural Ireland, walking out of a field, never mind the white trousers and the nice shiny wellies, but the fact that he didn't close the gate behind him, because anyone who grew up in a farm will know that that is the most triggering thing you can do, because it can lead to all sorts of calamities and disasters and, you know, phone calls and cattle on the road and cattle in someone else's field and garden and all the rest of it. So I think that was the gaffe, and it also showed that you can have the best planned, slickest social media campaigns going, but ultimately what people want is a bit of honesty and a bit of sincerity and a bit of authenticity from their candidates.
And Jim Gavin didn't exactly have the best planned social media campaign either, to say the least. Cónal, what are you going for?
I'm going to go for Fine Gael's attack.
Okay, so you're all on the presidency. Okay, great.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I'm going to go for Fine Gael's attack dog style social media videos in the closing stages of the presidential campaign. I picked this because I actually think it speaks to a bigger problem within Fine Gael of what the hell they're doing in general. Their social media is demented at the best of times, I would say. And what they did when they would refuse, they would say they're not panicking, right? When it became clear that Catherine Connolly was the clear front runner for the presidential election. And the ins and outs around whether she represented banks. We're not going to get into that here, but they released an attack dog style video on the Sunday, I think it was before the election, a lot long before the election, and I think it kind of just backfired on them. You know, it was the impact it had was that they were trying to, in the absence of Heather Humphreys, I think, being able to put forward really any cohesive vision for the Irish, they kind of reduced themselves down into this. Now, all's fair in love and war and all that, but I do think it probably pushed some people towards the Connolly camp and away from Heather Humphreys.
And kind of at odds with the cuddly anti-Heather kind of vibe as well. Here was American style attack Donald Trump style politics going on.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Heather Humphreys struggled to kind of get a grasp throughout all of the debates, really, and wasn't really. But she had this kind of, as you say, this folksy way about her, and then for the HQ to kind of then go on the attack and have ministers traipsed out to defend it in the following days was just kind of unedifying.
Yeah, that disconnection between the campaign and the candidate just not adding up. Okay, so I've weighed it all up. Jesus, spent hours in this one, lads. I really, and I'd be accused of bias here, Mary. None of you went for Michael Lowry and the two fingers or anything like that. You all stuck at the presidency.
It's been a long year.
Okay.
Our minds have just become so stuck in that presidential campaign that it's just, hard to kind of conceptualise anything that happened outside.
I think given that Mary had to spend so long whittling down the number of Jim Gavin Fianna Fáil gaffes over the course of the campaign, we'll have to give it to her, because any one of about a dozen elements of the Fianna Fáil campaign.
The best thing about that
one in the back.
Remember when he did drop out, somebody did a reverse on the video showing going backwards and closing the gate behind him.
I missed that one. We'll take that out and we can see it. Let's go to something more cerebral then. And when we're talking about the controversy of the year, we're looking at kind of more consequential, policy-driven matters that have an impact upon people. And we'll start with you, Mary. What did you go for here?
I went for the Dáil speaking rights row. It seems like 700 years ago now. And
this is the second category. So
you did the gesture now, on me. And I mean, it was actually just, Micheál Martin and Simon Harris had come back. Micheál Martin, about to be Taoiseach again, kind of pulled off something that they might have thought would be a difficult thing to pull off. But in order to form a government, they needed the support of independents, or they could have got the support of one of the smaller parties on the left. But they went for independents in the place of where the Green Party would have been in the previous coalition. And a group of independents, led by Michael Lowry, 9 independents, went in and out of government buildings every day, doing their talking and chatting with the government parties, and eventually agreed to support them in government.
They didn't get any preferential treatment at all, no local deals whatsoever. We just make that abundantly clear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They were there for the
kindness of their hearts,
the good of their health and the kindness of their hearts. Then 4 of them got positions in like junior minister positions, and one of them, Rona Murphy, became Ceann Comhairle, and she in fact thanked Michael Lowry, when she made her opening speech as Ceann Comhairle. And there were another 4 of them who were sitting on the opposition benches. Even though they were supporting the government, they weren't part of the government. They didn't have ministerial, any portfolio or anything like that. And they wanted to have speaking rights as opposition TDs in the form of a technical group where they could have a question, leaders' questions, and to the opposition, the rest of the opposition, this was them having their cake and eating it. But it caused absolute
So they wanted to be government and opposition. This was what the row all came down to.
Yeah, they wanted to have the best of both worlds, essentially. Influence government, but also be able to ask questions of government that they can clip out and put to their constituents and put on their social media accounts and all that kind of stuff. But I think, first of all, it delayed the election of Taoiseach, because Micheál Martin is Taoiseach, by a day, so that was fine. It galvanised the parties off the left. It was their first sort of, outing together as a group, and then they came together again for the presidential campaign to back Catherine Connolly. And I think it also just highlighted the sort of massive change that has happened now in Irish politics over the last 3 elections, since the financial crash, really, that the Dáil that, used to have big parties and maybe a few little ones is just so complicated.
The 2.5 party state is so gone.
Yeah, and it is so itty-bitty and fragmented, and, it's changed the nature of doing things. But I think it's also just damaged Micheál Martin, more so as Taoiseach that he is relying on this particular group of independents. It was seen as, sort of, just playing a little bit, loose with, the structures of the Dáil. And at the same time, he took real exception to that. But it was a massive controversy. I remember, the Dáil was delayed for hours and hours and hours on end. The row just seemed, completely intractable, leaving the Dáil chamber to have meetings on the sidelines, going back in again. And it really started this government off on a very sour note, I think.
And a bad start, which never really recovered from, arguably, towards the end of the year. Tabitha, let's go with your choice here.
Yeah, so I went for the housing czar controversy. Okay. So even when you go back to earlier this year when James Brown did his interview with Niamh Horan in the Sunday Independent, and he said that he was going to appoint this maverick who was going to kick down doors and he would help solve the housing crisis. So big promises that were coming out of James Brown, like right out from the start when he was appointed as housing minister. So a lot of people are going, okay, is this a different approach? Is this somebody who has a bit of momentum behind him? And then it was late. So then we found out what it was that it was going to be as part of the Housing Activation Office that James Brown was introducing, that they were going to second a load of experts from different stakeholder groups, semi-state bodies, and they were going to be the on-ground reporting of what was going on, within the housing sector. And there was going to be someone that was going to head up this person, and person was going to be the housing czar, was going to be the maverick. And then the name Brendan McDonagh was put out there. I think you in your former life had broken that name. And there was multiple reasons why this went down really badly. Firstly, I think because Brendan McDonagh's salary, it was anticipated he was going to retain the salary that he had as the CEO of NAMA, which was €430,000, huge salary, plus benefits. So that was the first thing. So opposition not happy about that. But also there was a question of, why do we have this housing czar in the first place? Is this not your job, James Brown, as housing minister? So again, criticism from that angle. But then also it was the row between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, because Fine Gael felt that they were out of the loop, that James Brown had selected Brendan McDonagh as his preference. This was the fella that he wanted for this position, but there was no consultation with the leaders. And I think Fine Gael's nose was a bit out of joint in relation to that, because they were coming under fire for Brendan McDonagh and his name, but they had very little to do with it. So it became an internal conflict within the government, but also a conflict across the Dáil chamber as well. And in the end, Fine Gael was having absolutely none of it. He wasn't going to be appointed when we were expecting him to be appointed. And then Brendan McDonagh ended up withdrawing his name by May, that he said, no, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. And speaking to a few people that were kind of in and around that day when Brendan McDonagh decided to resign, they said they'll just never forget that day. It was just drama and controversy and a lot of wringing of hands. And it was one of those things where housing is so serious, and it's a massive reason why a lot of people would have voted one way or the other, and it's impacting so many people for so long. And it was just like, this was a really bad start.
This was a new minister.
Exactly.
His big idea.
This was his big idea.
This is his job. Get it across the line.
Yeah.
And made a bags of it.
And even now, we still don't have this head of housing activation officer. I think it was the 20th of November that the applications closed.
Okay. Cónal, what are you going with?
Housing again. Okay. Rent pressure zones. You remember in the summer, another one of James Brown's big ideas was to bring the entire country under rent pressure zones. But what was really confusing about it, not unlike the two instances that you both mentioned, on the day when things came out, it was entirely unclear what the changes actually meant, when they would come into effect next March, when was the entire country going to be brought under? And we then subsequently found out during the day or the day after that emergency legislation was going to have to be brought in, a press release went out from the Department of Housing saying that all tenancies will be affected by the changes, where landlords will be allowed to raise. And Micheál Martin read this out in the Dáil, and the opposition said, here it is, what does that mean? The housing minister then had to go and clarify that it wouldn't be all, it wouldn't mean all tenancy. So you can imagine housing being a huge thing. Renters always worried as well in this country. They're not able to own a house. These changes coming in, and they can't even get their messaging straight on it. And I would also, it was only committee last week, I think it was Mary Conway, was up from the Irish Property Owners Association. And she said that we're still confused with what these changes mean. They come into effect in March and people still aren't entirely clear. So just a bit of a balls up really from the government there.
Okay. So in assessing the winner here, I was guided by the fact that two of you went down the housing route as yet again the big policy issue of the year. And in both cases, you seem to have identified problems with a new minister coming in and being unable to politically and effectively pass a resolution and bring it across to the public in a way in which people could actually understand what was going on. But one of the items that you highlight actually was a broader symptom of a problem that we saw across this year, which was government constantly blaming state agencies and somebody else. It's not really us. And if only we could get somebody to get this stuff done. And we were seeing that across a range of departments, particularly in the infrastructure and the children's hospital and plans and so on and so forth. It was always, Jesus, it'd be great if there was a government here who would actually do these things, said random Minister X. And for that reason, I'm going with Tabitha, is because it was just... It's so symbolic of this entire year, which did seem to be, whatever about a do-nothing doll, it seemed to be a bit of a do-nothing government in terms of getting off to such a slow start. So, Tabitha, we're giving you that one on the controversy of the year. Let's go with Politician of the Year. And this is a significant award. It's not a joke. It's actually the person who was the significant politician of the year. And, Cónal, who are you opting for here?
I'm going for Catherine Connolly.
Okay. The president. The big winner of the year.
The big winner of the year, I think. I mean, she was one of the first, I think she was the first to declare early, right? She wasn't sure about it. She's an independent TD, had kind of worked in the back, worked independently for years and years and years, was persuaded to go and was able to galvanise the parties of the left, but like what Mary was saying at the start of the year, was able to galvanise the parties of the left. Now, we won't get into the ins and outs of Jim Gavin and Heather Humphreys and Ray McGuinness dropping out, but You can only win the race that you're in. It's not your fault if other people don't. Exactly. And she did, and she got 63% of the valid vote. I mean, it's an astounding victory, really, from what you can consider a grassroots campaign. And that never really actually seemed to, nothing ever stuck to her either. It was quite remarkable throughout the campaign. It felt
Teflon,
like Teflon throughout the campaign.
He was more Teflon than Bertie Ahern himself.
I'm struck as well, Mary. Let's stick with Catherine Connolly for a second, because you were down in her office during the summer talking to her after she had launched, and it didn't really seem at that stage that campaign was going anywhere. It didn't seem to have any money behind it. There didn't seem to be a big momentum at all.
Yeah, I interviewed Catherine Connolly, I think it was the start of August actually. She was, very early declared for presidential candidate, which, the conventional wisdom in politics, and it was actually contained in the Fianna Fáil review, is you don't want to be out of the traps too early. You don't want to be out during silly season because you'll get involved in all sorts of controversies. She actually took a more single-minded opposite view and said, I'll be out early, because she's an independent and she felt she had to sort of put her name out there earlier. And I interviewed her very early on, and I put a lot of issues to her which hadn't really been put to her at that point of the campaign. It was still very early, around who organised her trip to Syria, for example, individuals that she met there. And her answers were not at all satisfactory, in the sense that she didn't say who organised it. She still hasn't said that when she became elected. She wasn't sure about the individuals she met. She couldn't remember, all this sort of thing. I also put it to her about her views on Europe and the fact that she said she was ashamed to be European under Ursula von der Leyen, and her criticism of France and the UK and other allies, the USA, saying she didn't trust them. And I was just surprised with her lack of sort of preparedness for questions. But also the fact that I went to Galway to Flood Street, her office, and I just met her there. She had no press handlers or anything like that at that point. She was fundraising, online through individual donations. She was organising a lot of that herself, and it didn't look like a very sort of professional campaign at that point. And I also thought, if she answered these questions so inadequately when it comes to a TV interview, she would be really damaged. So. Funnily enough, she was being asked the same questions towards the end of the campaign.
3 months later,
the questions didn't really change, and in some ways, I think,
and the answers didn't really change either.
Didn't either change either. So I think it showed that she actually stuck to her guns throughout. Yeah. She didn't, go into a room saying, how should I answer this or how should I answer that? She's like, this is who I am. Yeah. Take me or leave me. And people trusted her as a result of it.
And the same with the repossession cases. We never got any clarity on that, and that was towards the tail end of the campaign as well. So she did.
But even still,
it didn't matter.
But it also pointed to a view in the electorate, I think, and this younger cohort of voters who kind of are with a movement or not with it. And if they're with it, they're with it. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what happens or what comes
along
out.
the way.
And if they're not, they're not. And that's just it.
Okay. Who did you go for as your politician of the year then?
you're going to kill me, Fionnán. Catherine Connolly was taken by Cónal, but I went for Micheál Martin on the pure basis of his survival skills.
Okay, fine.
And that he has made it
being
to
Taoiseach.
this point.
Yeah.
And only because I remember as a political journalist when he became leader of Fianna Fáil, he was 100% guaranteed to be the first leader of Fianna Fáil who would never become Taoiseach. And yet here we are 15 years later and he is Taoiseach. And, he did, go about rebuilding the party. He did all that work. He did, win the election. He was back in the Taoiseach's office. In fact, at the start of the year, he started with a bang and he was back pretty much at the apex of his career, you could put it that way, with the potential to win the presidency, so to be the biggest party, local government, win the presidency and the largest party in the Dáil. Now we all know where it all went wrong. But given the scale of the calamity of what happened in the presidential campaign and given what we know about how it was handled and the level of dissatisfaction in the party over all of that, the fact that he will head into 2026, he may even start 2027 as Fianna Fáil leader and Taoiseach, has to say something about his political skills.
And in 2026, it'll be the 100th anniversary of Fianna Fáil. He'll have the EU presidency, so it's a big event. I'm thinking of Haughey back in the 80s. I'm thinking of John Bruton have the presidency, and the EU presidency is a big deal for a Taoiseach. It's a legacy.
Yeah, it's a massive deal, and it doesn't come around very often.
Yeah.
It comes around every 13 years. Ireland will hold it. So the Taoiseach who gets to be Taoiseach there, won't be a chance again for more than a decade. So this is a really, really, really big moment for him and his career. And the way some people might look at it is it might be what actually just, the cherry on top of his career that may just come to an end shortly there.
It would end, wouldn't it?
But a year is a long time in politics.
Exactly. And I think the polls in the next couple of months might be very telling.
Tabitha, who have you got?
Yeah, so I went for somebody different again, Richard Boyd Barrett.
Okay, very good.
Just for what he went through this year, I think was incredible. So announcing in April that he had throat cancer, did a really candid interview with Claire Byrne about that, about what he could potentially be facing and his treatment, that he would have to take a step back, which he did. And then in October came back again, did another very candid interview. And I think a lot of people would have been listening to him on the radio and heard the treatment and the seriousness of the treatment that he would have gone through over those few months and kind of thought that must have really taken a toll on him. And of course it would. Like when you have throat cancer and you have to go through that level of treatment, it would. But then back in November 5th, I think, was the day he returned to the Dáil.
I would like to take the opportunity to welcome Deputy Richard Boyd Barrett back to the House.
And despite maybe you might be able to see it in him that he had been through cancer and maybe heard it a little bit, the level of energy from Richard Boyd Barrett had not deteriorated at all.
No,
I thought it was extraordinary.
He's one of those TDs when we're sitting in our office, you can hear him in the Dáil.
Yeah, the intonation probably came down a wee bit. It probably helps as well. Richard Boyd Barrett, people may disagree with his ideology, but he is a nice bloke.
And that was another thing that I noticed.
A lot of affection for him.
While he was gone, and you would speak to people on the other side of the Dáil chamber that were in government, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and they kind of say, I wonder how Richard's getting on. Yeah. Or, geez, you'd miss Richard now in the Dáil chamber, and, he'd be really giving it welly, and he'd be giving it socks, and he'd be giving out to you, and then he'd be walking up the stairs and he'd kind of give you an L wink. Because he knows, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have conviction in what he's saying, but he's also trying to, like you said, he's just a good person.
Yeah.
And I was on radio with him a few weeks ago, and again, it was a debate format panel show, and you wouldn't have known that he had been through what he had been through the last few months. There was zero energy loss there at all, and he was holding his own.
Okay.
And can I add, it's such a divisive time in politics that he has his very staunch ideological views, and he still retains an awful lot of respect. Yeah. But just I was
Across the political divide,
I was there on the day of the inauguration up in Dublin Castle, and funnily enough, Richard Boyd Barrett was sitting kind of in the aisle seat, facing across the front row of all the Fianna Fáil rebels sitting across from him. And when Micheál Martin walked in the door, and he had to pass, 5 or 6 of the party rebels on the right and Richard Boyd Barrett on the left, and he made such a beeline for Richard Boyd Barrett and the biggest and warmest handshake, and I think no one was ever as happy to see Richard Boyd Barrett that day as the Taoiseach.
Okay, summing up 2025, I think there can only be one winner here in terms of somebody who galvanised a campaign on herself. And you would talk about the unified left, but it was actually the Catherine Connolly unified the left in the manner in which she set out early, she stuck to her guns. Ultimately, she forced Sinn Féin to not run a candidate.
Yeah.
She forced the Labour Party to come in and weigh in behind her. I think if there was a speech of the year, probably Eileen Flynn's introduction for her at her campaign launch was just fabulous, just very off the cuff and very, very personal. But yeah, we'll give it to you, Cónal, with Catherine Connolly.
Connell's back in the race.
For politician
In the race.
of the year.
Yeah, you've entered.
You're one of these parents that tells all their kids their drawings are lovely.
Yeah.
He has to make a decision now, Mary.
Okay, so the Brat of the year is effectively the big disruptor of 2025 and the person who was edgy and out there. Right, Mary, who have you gone for?
So by the way, Cónal got in first, by the way, with all his nominations. So anyway, I'm going to go for Bertie.
Vote early and often.
Exactly.
Yes.
I'm going to go for Bertie Ahern.
Yeah.
Okay.
And his audacious attempt at a comeback to the top office. So Bertie Ahern,
If he did.
yeah. So Bertie Ahern, it was the Friday evening that Billy Keller had just announced that he wanted to run up against Jim Gavin, and it was all very tense. And that was the weekend where Micheál Martin was ringing around TDs asking them to back Jim Gavin. Billy Keller was driving around the country, visiting TDs, asking them to vote for him. Bertie Ahern turned up at Glasnevin Cemetery. It was a party commemoration for Eamon de Valera, and walked straight into a media sort of doorstep, knowing exactly what he was doing, and had all his dates in order of the contacts he attempted to make with various figures. Sean Dorgan, Secretary General in Fianna Fáil, and he asked them one simple question before Christmas. Then he went through all the dates and didn't tell us what the simple question was until after he'd gone through all the dates. The question being, will you back me or not?
And the question was simple: would the leadership back me or not? That was it, so that's my position.
They told him they'd get back to him before Easter, and they never, ever did. And then there was an apology in the Fianna Fáil Review to how Bertie Ahern was treated. And then he came out afterwards and said he could have won the thing after the thing.
And a footnote to the Fianna Fáil Review, which isn't in it, is if you look at the dates, it was actually they didn't get back to him until the day after Jim Gavin's name came out publicly in his own paper, and suddenly they needed to scramble.
Oh
and tell
yes,
Bertie,
yeah.
so-
But he said they didn't come back to him. He learned in a newspaper report that he wasn't.
That's right.
person.
He wasn't
He
going
wasn't
to.
the-
And
he
Sean
wasn't.
Dorgan has admitted he should have.
Yeah, Jim Gavin was in effect in there. Ultimately, did Bertie ever intend to run though? I mean, was he basically, was it a game of forcing, he wanted an answer from Micheál Martin, are you going to back me or not?
Yeah, I thought Bertie Ahern was sort of just playing games.
What if Micheál had called his bluff and go, yeah, grand, no bother? What would he have done then?
Well, I thought he was playing games with the two. But then when we saw the sort of level of visceral anger really he had with the party at the end of it, and it did appear that he was, very genuinely, annoyed with how he was treated.
Because
by
it's
the
so
party.
uncharacteristic of a Fianna Fáil leader to shaft a previous Fianna Fáil leader in a presidential election nomination, isn't that right?
Yeah. I mean, okay, it was never going to be a
Shades of
prospect.
Albert
anyhow.
Reynolds back in 97 there. But anyway, Cónal, who are you going for?
Micheál Martin.
Really?
Yeah, why not? And I'm not going to make too many points about it because Mary's made them all very well in saying the politician just turned on its head. I mean, the speaking rights row going into that deal, just blustering through it, digging his heels in every step of the way throughout the year. The same with Jim Gavin over the parliamentary party.
The survivor element of it.
The survivor element of it.
Okay.
And just effectively up until yesterday going, I don't need to put down a motion of confidence in myself. Why would I?
Yeah.
He may be quite right.
Yeah.
But I think just through
Facing down the rebels constantly.
and having started the year, I think, ending the last year and starting this year in full command of his party to where he is now, where through his own brattishness, I would argue.
Yeah,
but I'm not going to, I think we...
And constantly saying, come and take me out if you want.
Come and take me out, exactly.
Yeah. Tabitha, who have you got?
I went for who has to be the ultimate brat of this year, Billy Kelleher. Like,
okay, you're all very...
Thanks, Billy Kelleher.
Yeah, you're all very...
I thought it was Cónal.
Presidential election nominated across your nominations. Go on, give me why Billy?
Well, it was brat behaviour from the outset, wasn't it? Like, you know, when we didn't know who Fianna Fáil was going to choose, whether or not Fianna Fáil were going to be in or out of the race. And he said, well, I'm not having any of this. I'm going to come out and start saying, we need an answer. We need to know what's going on. So he really started stirring at that in that moment. And it was only after that people started saying to him, well, you should do it yourself. And then he went, do you know what? Yeah, I will. And I'm going to run and I'm going to stick it to Micheál Martin. I'm going to stick it to the party and the people who aren't making any decisions. And I'm going to put my name into the ring. Then we had Jim Gavin, of course, who that name came out. And Billy Kelleher said, yeah, I'm going to go up against him. And he put up a really, really good fight, you know, and to a certain extent he was on the back foot. He didn't have enough time. Maybe I think it's the argument now in hindsight that if he had had more time, he could have been successful. But the vote was 41 votes to 29, which was an awful lot closer than I think anybody did. And a few people that was in that parliamentary party meeting when the vote was happening, that when those numbers came out, Micheál Martin went white. He was not happy with how close that was. And that was purely on the back of Billy Kelleher's brat behaviour. And he decided to go around. He was hitting the phones. He was talking to people, but also showing that he was able to build on the relationships and the friendships that he had built over decades in that party, and party loyalty that I think a lot of people really appreciated.
In hindsight, had the party known then what they know now about Jim Gavin, and indeed what others, you'd argue, in the Fianna Fáil hierarchy knew then and didn't tell them, would Billy have flipped another half dozen votes towards himself?
I think he did. Oh yeah, definitely. I think so. And even if he just had that little bit more time, like I don't know if it's true that if Billy Kelleher had expressed an interest earlier in the year or had gotten in before June 9th when Jim Gavin's name had been put forward, whether or not he would have been selected anyway. I think there was an opinion there within the Fianna Fáil HQ and Micheál Martin that they didn't want a politician. They wanted somebody outside of Fianna Fáil to try to, you know, I don't know, for multiple reasons, I suppose, you know, not having to drag up Fianna Fáil's past or explain away Fianna Fáil's presence in government and their track record in government. But I think if they knew what they knew now, if some people had known what we know now, yeah, I definitely think he would have been in with a chance of getting the nomination.
Yeah, none of you went for Michael Lowry. Mary.
Yeah, Mary, why?
Yeah, I mean,
Mary, discuss. I'll come to the other two of you then in a minute, like, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, that just sums it all up, doesn't it? It was a gesture and nothing more was needed.
But to go from
the kingmaker, though, as well.
To go from being in exile for so many years to being back as the kingmaker of the government, the man who came up with the deal to put a government together, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and Independent.
Yeah, and I mean, he held all the cards. You know, do you want me to nominate Michael Lowry now?
No. Okay,
Honorary mention to Michael Lowry.
If I do,
you can stick to your guns there. I'm fierce. Michael Lowry would have fitted into any of these categories. In fact, I might nominate him in each of them and award myself the award. No, I can't go for Micheál Martin. There's just two establishments in this case. I think I would give it to Bertie Ahern if ultimately he had followed through and actually said, to hell with it, I want to go for the nomination. I think I'm going to go for Billy Kelleher on the basis that he followed through, put his name forward. He really threw a spanner in the works.
Completely.
The Jim Gavin master plan started to go astray once Billy Kelleher came onto the pitch and decided, you know what? No, I'm running. And the fact that they tried to blitz him then with all the cabinet ministers and all the Dublin TDs and basically saying to him, you can't win this. And Billy went into that weekend and said, you know what? Doesn't matter. I'm sticking with it anyway. For that reason, Billy Kelleher is the brat of the year. Where next year we'll be talking about Billy Kelleher as the elder statesman and the highly respected figure within Fianna Fáil. Right. So I'm doing my maths. Unlike Simon Harris, I did actually study economics in college.
Meow.
So that means that Mary, you won 1, Cónal won 1, and Tabitha, you have 2 awards. So you are this year's champion. As we bring the political awards to a close for 2025, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to Indo Politics. Now that the Dáil is on its Christmas break, so are we. We'll be back next year for more insight analysis and Leinster House gossip. And you can find all the latest episodes episodes of Indo Politics on the Irish Independent's YouTube channel. And from next year, the show will also be available on all our podcast platforms. Until next year, have a good one. Nolik Honig Díobh Galéir.